Welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing my favorite perennials and shrubs that thrive in my Texas Zone 8 garden and make stunning cut flowers. If you've ever dreamed of creating gorgeous floral arrangements straight from your own garden, this video is for you. Hey y'all, it's Amanda and this is my Texas Zone 8 garden, and before we dive in, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a fellow gardening friend. Okay, so today I'm inside, not because it's cold outside, but because it's 90 degrees outside. It's the beginning of February. I'm filming this video on February 3rd and it's hot and my body's just not prepared for that. So I was like, let me come inside and film a video today. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about cut flowers, but I specifically want to talk about the best perennials and the best shrubs for cut flowers in my area. And I want to specifically talk about this because I think a lot of us can get really wrapped up in growing a lot of annuals, zinnias, sunflowers, all that fun stuff. But after a while, it gets really hard to produce that year after year after year and to produce an amount that you feel good about. So I love having a mix of perennials and shrubs that come back year after year with very little maintenance and provide beautiful cut flowers for my arrangements. Now, my background is I used to be a florist and I love flowers, and that really got me focused on gardening, growing my own flowers, and being able to create arrangements to bring into my house. I do not sell any of my flowers. I literally just grow them for pure enjoyment. And I've grown a ton, hundreds of different varieties over the years, and I have a lot of fun doing that. But I will say there's just something really great about a perennial and shrub that just is there year after year for you, providing beautiful blooms. So let's talk about what I'm specifically looking for within these perennials and these shrubs. I need them to be hardy in my area. I am Zone 8 in North Texas, and you definitely need to know your zone when you're looking at different plants. I need them to do double duty for me in the garden. I need them to work as a cut flower, and I need them to beautify my garden. So I don't want to always, have this plant that just doesn't look great and doesn't have multiple functions. So being able to produce a beautiful scent of blooms, but then have some nice foliage and continues to look attractive in my yard is really, really great. I also need them to be fairly easy to care for. I don't like to have tons of high maintenance plants in my garden because it's just more than I can handle. So I don't mind a couple, but most of my plants, I really need them to be very low key. And then finally, I need them to be a cost-effective plant. I don't have the money to go spend $80 on a 1 or 2 gallon fancy, unusual, rare plant. So I need these to be plants that are fairly cost effective, that they're not too much of the nursery, and even more so, if I need to grow them from seed or bare root, I can do that as well. All right, and so when it got down to it, I ended up narrowing it down to 9 plants that I really feel comfortable with. I kept thinking that I would get to 10, but I kept teetering on a few, so I ended up just going with 9. So I'm going to talk about each of these types of plants, why I like them, and what the best varieties of those plants are for my particular area. And then I'm also going to talk about some pro tips for growing each of those individual plants. Let's get started. Okay, number 1 on my list is Echinacea, or also known as coneflower. Let's talk about why I think it's great. Echinacea is heat tolerant, drought resistant, and produces long-lasting blooms, perfect for arrangements. It looks great when it's blooming, and it also looks great when the flowers begin to produce pods and produce seeds. I think that they look really pretty in that sort as well. Pollinators love them. Wildlife is attracted to their seed heads, and they really handle some serious sun in my area. I have several planted on the west side of my house, and they deal with drought and temperatures like it's no big deal at all. All right, so some of my favorite varieties for Echinacea in Texas Zone 8 is Powwow Wildberry. I actually like both of the Powwow series, Powwow White and Powwow Wildberry, and it is a beautiful, bright magenta colors, and it produces a ton of blooms, I'm actually getting to the point where I need to divide mine out and start moving them around. The next variety is Cheyenne Spirit, and that one is readily available in the area, and you can grow that one from seed. I believe you can grow all of these varieties from seed. Cheyenne Spirit has like a mix of colors. So when you see it at the nursery, it might be pale creamy yellow, or it might be orange, or it might be a pink color, or I mean, it kind of grows in a wide variety of colors, which I think is really fun because all the colors go really well together. And it's a pretty prolific bloomer, not as prolific as the powwow, but still pretty prolific. And then last on my list for best varieties is White Swan, and that is a classic creamy white petals. Beautiful. I love to have at least a couple of white varieties of blooms in my garden because they mix so well with other things. All right, and then pro tip for growing coneflower or echinacea is deadhead regularly, and that encourages continuous blooms throughout the season. Echinacea is a cut and come again, so the more you cut on it, the more blooms it's going to produce. Now, it's really hard for some people to cut flowers, but we are specifically talking about cut flowers today. So make sure you cut deep on the plant for the echinacea, and it will produce more blooms for you throughout the season. Okay, next on my list is Salvia, which I think a lot of people don't think of necessarily as a cut flower, but it is great in arrangements. So why do I think it's great? Salvia is a low maintenance perennial, and definitely low maintenance, that brings texture and vibrant spikes of color to arrangements. It's also a really great one that you can just like cut down. You know, it can bloom out and you can just like cut it in half all the way down and it will send up a whole nother cycle of blooms, which is absolutely beautiful. It comes in a ton of different colors, textures, and sizes, which is also very cool. Some of my favorite varieties for Texas Zone 8, Mystic Spires Blue, which is more of a compact, prolific bloomer, beautiful, long-lasting flowers in the vase. Next is Amistad, which is rich purple blooms, and I think it has very like a royal look to it, nice, full, and beautiful. And then finally Victoria Blue, which I've grown a lot of over the years. Classic blue salvia with excellent vase life. That one grows really nice and tall, so you get some really nice long stems. Pro tip for salvia, it thrives in full sun but appreciates some afternoon shade and extreme heat. It definitely does that, but I will say even my salvias that are in full sun, even in the afternoon, they still bloom prolifically. They do really great. Once it's gone through a blooming cycle, like I said, just cut the plant back by half and it will shoot up another round of blooms. Okay, number 3 on my list is hydrangeas, and I do have to say hydrangeas with a grain of salt because not all hydrangeas do well in the North Texas area, so you really have to be very specific about the varieties that you choose. Why do I think it's great? It's known for being lush, show-stopping blooms, perfect for fresh or dried hydrangea blooms or dried. I think that they add a certain level of lushness that it's hard to get with other shrubs and other flowers, particularly with its big, bold, beautiful green leaves. And then, of course, awesome, gorgeous blooms that there's just no comparing anything else to hydrangea blooms. With that being said, a few varieties that I think grow best in Texas Zone 8. First one being Limelight, which I've grown for multiple years, and it produces a lime green to creamy panicle flower. Panicle means it blooms on new wood, so you can cut it back every year, and it really handles some sun. I do think it appreciates a little bit of afternoon shade, especially in the North Texas area, but it produces absolutely beautiful, gorgeous blooms. Next is Endless Summer. It is a re-blooming blue and pink mop head flowers, so you can cut the flowers and it's going to produce new blooms right away. Like it's not going to, you don't have to wait a full year in the cycle. So those are really fun. I really also love the Endless Summer in containers. I think it does really, really well. Once again, it also appreciates a little bit of afternoon shade. I find that with Endless Summer, I don't actually end up cutting it very often because I'm so obsessed with the color of the blooms. And then last on my list today is PG, and that is a panicle variety. And remember, panicle variety grows off of, blooms off of new growth, and it tolerates Texas heat absolutely beautifully. Texas heat, you probably have seen that in all 3 of these varieties, it's extremely important to consider. Some of the more traditional hydrangeas that you see up north do not do well down here in the south. Okay, my pro tip for hydrangeas is plant in well-draining soil and morning sun with afternoon shade for the very best blooms. If your hydrangea in the North Texas area is getting full sun all day, including the afternoon, you're going to see some scorching on the flowers and on the leaves. So you definitely need to put it in an appropriate location. Well draining soil, we deal with a lot of clay in this area. So what you need to do is just dig out a big hole of that clay, get rid of that clay, and go ahead and mix in potting soil, manure, and great stuff to help your plant thrive and then to help it drain as well. Okay, number 4 on my list is Yarrow, also known as Echinacea. And Yarrow, I feel like I'm discovering a little bit more about Yarrow as the time goes on. And there's a few important tips to keep Yarrow from flopping over. So why do I think it's great? It provides clusters of small blooms with excellent vase life and comes in a range of colors. It actually deals with some heat pretty well. It is an excellent perennial in our area. The best varieties for Texas Zone 8, in my opinion, are Moonshine, which is a very robust plant, produces bright yellow blooms and long, beautiful stems, sturdy stems as well, which is great for cut flowers. Next on the list is Paprika, and that one, I like it not because it produces really long stems, it produces medium length stems for me at least, but I love its deep red with yellow centers. It's just a very unusual color combination, which I think is really fun to have late spring into early summer. And then the last variety I like is Coronation Gold, and that is a golden yellow flowers with extremely tall stems as well. Very hardy in our particular area. Now, pro tip for Yarrow, Yarrow thrives in poor, well-draining soil and tolerates drought once established. I think that that's the biggest mistake that I've made with my yarrows in the past is I have fertilized them too much. Don't fertilize them. Put them in cruddy soil. They do better in the cruddy soil. If they're in rich soil, their stems will fall over to the side. I also find if they get too much shade, the stems will collapse as well. So make sure it has full sun, well-draining soil that's not super rich in fertilizer or in, obviously organic matter. Okay, number 5 on my list is Phlox. And Phlox was one of the original cut flowers that I started growing, one of the original perennial cut flowers that I started growing over a decade ago, and I'm still obsessed with it to this point. Why do I think it's great? It brings fragrance and a cottage garden style feeling to any particular arrangement or garden. It's a prolific bloomer in the right conditions. I've definitely had phlox in some areas of the garden which are awesome, and phlox in some areas of the garden which absolutely fails. That's super important. Best varieties for Texas Zone 8, David, which is a white mildew resistant variety that grows quite large and produces extremely long stems. I first planted David in the wrong place. I gave it too much shade, and now I've moved it to a sunnier place, so hopefully it will continue to do better. Next variety is Bright Eyes, and that is pink flowers with darker centers. Absolutely beautiful, gorgeous, a little bit of a shorter variety, so you can use it for some borders or some midway planting. And then finally, Blue Paradise, which produces purple blooms with a hint of blue to them, which is a very unusual. Anytime you can get any kind of blue in a flower is just very unusual. Pro tip for growing phlox, keep the soil moist and provide good air circulation because it can suffer from powdery mildew, so that's super important. You don't want a lot of other stuff crowding around it. I will say if you do suffer from powdery mildew, you can cut it back, you can treat it, and the plant will come back in the future. I also feel like it's really important to harvest phlox a little bit earlier. Don't wait till all the flowers are open. Wait till they're all, maybe a few of the flowers on the stem have started to open, and then go ahead and harvest it at that point. So you want to harvest it a little bit more earlier on. Okay, number 6 on my list is roses. And so obviously roses make for an excellent cut flower. And the deal about roses is they do tend to require a little bit more upkeep, but I'm discovering that upkeep is worth it because roses are just so beautiful, stately, whimsical, elegant. Just love having them in my space. So why do I think it's great? It's a classic choice for cut flowers. It offers timeless elegance and fragrance. There are a multitude, hundreds and hundreds of varieties of roses that you can grow, anything from lower miniature to really tall 6-foot ones and even climbers. Just so much to choose from. And if you're really diligent and really pay attention, you can choose the perfect one for your garden. So the best varieties for Texas Zone 8, and I think that's really important to focus on your particular zone and what works best for your zone. So don't get just, obsess all the pretty pictures. Really see what's going to do well in your area regarding roses. Number 1 on my list is Belinda's Dream, and it has beautiful pink fragrant blooms that are just a classic clear crystal pink, heat tolerant and disease resistant. Disease resistant is extremely important in the North Texas area. Next on my list is Iceberg, and it is a white Floribunda rose, so it's going to have a prolific blooms on the end. It's going to have multiple blooms on the end instead of just a long stem with a single bloom on it. Like that is a hybrid tea, has the long stem and single bloom. And Iceberg is available as a shrub, but also as a climber. And then number 3 on my list, it's kind of like a general grouping of them, which are called earth-kind varieties. And these earth-kind roses are bred for Texas heat and disease resistant. So disease resistant. So you can actually just Google earth-kind roses and look it up, and it will talk about the ones that do really great in our area. Pro tip for roses in my area: avoid knockout roses in North Texas, as they are prone to red rosette disease, which is running rampant. It's actually passed by mites in the wind. It's running rampant through the North Texas area, and knockout roses are the #1 culprit of them. And yet all of our nurseries, all of our big box stores, they all sell knockout roses like crazy. So definitely stay away from knockout roses so that you are not continuing the spread of red rosette disease. Okay, number 7 on my list is Shasta Daisy. And if you had asked me 2 years ago if I thought Shasta Daisy was a good cut flower perennial to have, I would have said no, that I don't like it. My mind has changed, and my mind changes quite frequently as I continue to garden and learn and explore and experience. My mind changes on different things over time. And Shasta Daisies is one of the big ones that has changed as of late. Why I think it's great: it creates delicate, airy blooms that add movement and texture to floral arrangements. You can get Shasta Daisies that are low growing, Shasta Daisies that are nice and tall and whimsical. I think they're extremely hardy in arrangements, and they have a very long vase life. Best varieties for Texas Zone 8. The first one is Becky, and it's known for being heat tolerant and long blooming. It's more of just kind of a classic, beautiful daisy look. Next on the list is Snow Lady, which is a compact variety with large blooms, very large, beautiful, gorgeous blooms. Doesn't spread like crazy. Although regarding spreading, you can divide Shasta Daisies every 2 to 3 years. So you can very quickly create a border just off of a couple of plants, which is really fun. One of the varieties I'm growing lately that I like is the Banana Cream, and I'm really enjoying that one. It has suffered from a little bit of powdery mildew, but it's still worth it to me in the end. Okay, pro tip for Shasta Daisies is to remove spent blooms to encourage repeat flowering. And I struggle with this because I love the look of Shasta Daisies in my garden. I think it's absolutely beautiful. It's tough for me to go in there and cut stuff back. But if you will go in and deadhead, throughout its blooming season, it will continue to produce more blooms along the way. Okay, number 8 on my list is Gaura or Gaura. Gaura or Gaura. I say Gaura, even though it's spelled a different way. And it's also known as butterfly flower. And I would say that Gaura isn't necessarily considered, most people don't consider it a cut flower, but it makes for an excellent cut flower. It's absolutely beautiful perennial. Why do I think it's great? It has very delicate, airy blooms that add movement and texture to floral arrangements, but also to your garden. And it just is so airy and delicate. It's just absolutely beautiful, and pollinators are obsessed with Gaura. Some of the best varieties for Texas Zone 8, the first one is Whirling Butterflies, and it has beautiful classic white blooms on long, thin, airy stems that are just absolutely beautiful. Another good variety is Siskiyou Pink, and that is basically the opposite in that it has pink flowers on tall, airy stems. One thing about Gaura is once it's pushed out its blooms, you can come through and just cut right across it, leaving about 6 to 10 inches at the base of the plant, and it will send up a whole nother set of blooms. I've mentioned a lot of cut and come again flowers. I might need to do a whole video on cut and come again flowers. That might be good for me to look at for future videos. A lot of times when I'm talking through videos, I will say something and discover an idea and I'm jotting it down. And so I've mentioned cut and come again at least 4 times already. So maybe we need to do a whole video focus on cut and come again flowers and how those can be extremely beneficial for small gardens. Okay, pro tip for Gaura: tolerates heat and drought, but prefers well-draining soil. So if you, like me, have a lot of clay soil, make sure you dig out a lot of that clay, mix it in with, I typically do potting soil and compost and break it down a little bit before planting your Gaura in that location. Okay, and then last, and number 9 on my list, is Russian sage. And Russian sage I discovered during COVID while I was watching Laura with Garden Answer. She was planting like the denim and lace, or lace denim, or whatever that variety is, with proven winners, and I just really like the look of it. So then I went and found the actual traditional Russian sage, which is a little bit more wild and unkempt, and I've just really enjoyed growing it in my garden. Why I think it's great: it has tall spikes of silvery foliage and lavender blooms that makes for an eye-catching filler in arrangements. Very airy, beautiful blooms. They have like a spike look like you would think of like as a snapdragon bloom, but it's not as tight and robust as the snapdragon bloom. Absolutely beautiful. It smells amazing because it obviously is a sage. Best varieties for Texas Zone 8, Little Spire, which is a more compact variety, because traditional Russian sage is gigantic and it can get really big, 5-6 feet tall if you want it to. Absolutely beautiful. A lot of times it might need some support. It's definitely one of those flowers that if your soil is too fertile, it all flops over. It's important to remember that. The next variety is Filigrane, which is more delicate foliage, which a lot of times for the Russian sage, I don't utilize a lot of the foliage necessarily in the arrangements, but I do like that silvery green foliage in my actual garden. So even when I go back and cut the blooms, I still have that beautiful contrasting foliage mixed into my flower beds. Okay, and then pro tip for Russian sage: plant in full sun with well-draining soil for best results, and it does not like to be overly fertilized. So keep that in mind. You probably heard well-draining multiple times, and that's because in the Texas area we have a lot of clay. The North Texas area we have a lot of clay, which really holds on to water, and that makes it really difficult for some plants. A lot of them will rot because of holding on to that water. So you definitely want to break down that clay, mix it in with some potting soil, mix in some manure or compost, and create a more a light and airier blend than just solid clay. Okay, I really like my list. I worked hard on this list. There were some runners up, and I just kind of just went through it, and I was like, how can I really focus on this? And originally when I was making this list, I also started mixing in shrubbery that I thought is really good for greenery accents as well. And then I decided to just separate it and only do cut flowers from it. And I'll do another video on greenery, shrubs and such that are really great for greenery as well, for mixed flower arrangements. But yeah, felt really good about this list. It might not necessarily be a lot of the traditional stuff that you're usually hear, but really focusing on the best perennials and shrubs that you can plant it and really not stress about having to replant in future years. That once again, we really focus on all of them having minimal maintenance and care. We want them to be easy to care for. We want them to be cost effective. So nothing that was like crazy expensive, although your roses can get very expensive, but if you're willing to start from bare root, you can get some more inexpensive plants. And then making sure that they were hardy for my area and making sure that they did double duty as a cut flower, but also beautifying my garden. Okay, let me know what I missed. I'm sure I missed some. I'm sure there's some that you guys are like, I cannot believe you didn't say this one. So drop some comments below and let me know what you think are really great cut flower, shrubs, and perennials for the North Texas area. And if you're not in Zone 8 North Texas area, let me know which ones you think are good for your area. Make sure you list your area so that when others are going through the comments, you guys can interact with people who are in the similar zones. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. As always, make sure you like and comment on the video. Every time you like and comment, it helps grow my video on my channel so much. If you don't feel comfortable leaving a comment, just drop me an emoji below, letting me know that you made it to the end of the video and that you say hi. And be sure to check me out on my social media outlets, including Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I also started a Patreon community if you're interested in a more intimate, smaller setting of gardeners who love to talk all things gardening. It's really, really fun. I really enjoy it. Since we've gotten started, so we've already got 21 members. It's been really fun kind of hearing what everybody's thoughts are, where everybody's growing, what's going in the garden right now, giving advice, answering questions, and just really being able to interact with each other. It's a really fun Patreon community. As always, she's a mad gardener or decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all.